Hello there, my very good friends. Andy Murray here for What Culture Wrestling, and today I'm coming at you with a companion video to one that we released back in February that looked at the promises AEW had made since launching but hadn't kept. But you know, man, I was just kind of sitting over there on my couch the other day thinking, if you're going to go to the effort of making a video highlighting the promises they haven't kept, then you've kind of got to go the other way around as well, right? You've got to be fair, you've got to be as close to objective as you can possibly be, particularly when you consider that the level of trust this promotion has with its audience and the number of promises they've actually been really good at keeping since launching back in January 2019. So I think the title explains things considerably well. Let's just get on with it. Let's get to the goddamn points. I'm Andy for What Culture Wrestling, and here are 9 promises that AEW have made since launching and have kept. Number 9, a lighter schedule. Now this one is mainly revolving around the wrestlers. So Tony Khan spoke to Wade Keller of Pro Wrestling Torch in October 2019, just before AEW's weekly launch with Dynamite. One of the things he wanted to stress during that was that AEW would basically have a much lighter schedule than you might expect. There'd be no house shows whatsoever in the first year, and that turned out to be the case. 2019 closed without a single AEW house show. AEW would operate only on Wednesdays for Dynamite tapings, plus the occasional Saturday for pay-per-views. Now eventually they would look to move into a model where they can deliver 85 to 125 shows a year, but Khan has a simple philosophy. Not every wrestler needs to be on every show, and he didn't want a future where his performers had to work more than 100 dates a year for his company. He didn't want people on the road and away from their families grinding their bodies down for most of the week, and wanted to promote a much healthier work-life balance than one might expect in American wrestling. And you know, looking at those statements objectively, yeah, I mean, they've done it. The AEW have held no house shows, they have held no elaborate tours, they have not ground their performers' bodies to dust with a crazy road schedule. Now, who knows what they were planning, right, before the ongoing global situation kicked in, but as things stand, they're doing pretty damn well as far as the lighter schedule goes. Number 8, creative freedom. Now this point was absolutely critical in establishing AEW as a WWE alternative from day one, because if you look at the modern WWE product and everything we hear emanating from backstage, I think it's fair to say that that company is micromanaged to a fault. Again, when he spoke to Wade Keller, Tony Khan spoke about encouraging people to come forward with creative ideas, to pitch things to management, and they would be given extra leeway for these things to be put into place. He wanted his performers to come off as extensions of themselves and not just actors playing a role. And when you look at the product, I think it's pretty safe to say that they've accomplished that. I mean, take a guy like Darby Allin. He's out there being his goddamn self. You wouldn't see those black and white vignettes or the face paint or the skateboard or any of his other cool motifs if he wasn't allowed to implement his own ideas. Same goes for guys like Sammy Guevara, Britt Baker, for example, with her recent heel turn. Much of this is coming from the performers themselves, and it resonates stronger as a result. Number 7, ringside presentation. Another promise that was made just before AEW launched Dynamite was that the bulk of their most important content, I'm talking matches, angles, promos, whatever else, would go down either in the ring or at the ringside area. Tony Khan actually used the UFC as a direct reference point because, you know, you're watching a UFC show, you're gonna get the odd little snippet of something going on backstage, maybe someone wrapping their hands, throwing a few punches, but you're not getting silly soap opera stuff, right? And if you want to present a product that has a real sport feel, well, here you go. You need this kind of thing. You need it to feel a bit more like something like the UFC, which, yes, I know isn't scripted. So yeah, while we have seen the occasional invisible camera segment backstage, you know, the vast majority of AEW's content goes down in the ring. And I think things like Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega brawling all over the arena and then doing that DDT through the glass table shows how flexible you can be with that old school real sport type presentation. Now, Admittedly, slight caveat, things have changed somewhat in the current era, but you know, AEW is operating empty arenas, like everyone else. They've had to go to places like the Hardy Compound and other pre-recorded interviews, the Bubbly Bunch, all that stuff to fill airtime. It's the right thing to do for the right situation, but I reckon as soon as things go back to normal, we might see the odd cool vignette here and there, but we're gonna get back to the ringside stuff. Number 6, no scripted promos. And this is another example of AEW trying to take something that people hate about WWE and just completely flipping it around. So some quotes here actually from Tony Khan when he was spoken to Wade Keller. He said that people could expect fewer ridiculous scripted promos because, in his words, when you have guys like Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley, I mean, why wouldn't you have them talk? Why wouldn't you have them come up with their own stuff? And as a result, you have a product bearing none of the hallmarks of WWE's rampant, awkward, overbearing, stunted, scripted promo delivery. Now, that was a very elaborate way of saying things, but you get the point. These people sound like human beings. Chris Jericho sounds natural. Sammy Guevara sounds natural. Britt Baker sounds natural. The reason is because their words are their own. They came up with this stuff. It wasn't just handed to them on a script a couple of hours before the show hit the air. So yeah, it's another promise fulfilled. Number 5, fewer screwy finishes. Cast your minds back, if you will, to the 8th of January episode of Dynamite from this year. There was a match between Sammy Guevara and Christopher Daniels. In that match, there was a distraction finish. Pentagon Jr. comes out to the ramp. He's got a microphone, he says some stuff. Chris Daniels gets distracted. Sammy Guevara takes the win. Now, this finish, though it sounds pretty innocuous and you wouldn't really think much of it if it went down on Raw or SmackDown, it provoked outrage because this was precisely the kind of thing that AEW promised not to deliver when they launched. However, I think the wording of that promise is absolutely critical, and I mean, can you name me one or two other examples of a screwy distraction finish that the company's done since launch? Because off the top of my head, I really can't think of another. There might be one, right? I'll give you that. Maybe there's another one somewhere. But if we're talking like the half a year worth of product that this company has produced, one or two is nothing. And again, the wording is critical. We were told to expect fewer screwy finishes, fewer distractions, fewer disqualifications. And so far, they've booked primarily on clean finishes. In fact, the one disqualification so far in AEW was a fall in the Pac versus Kenny Omega Iron Man match, and even then, it was Pac willingly taking the DQ so he could gain an advantage by beating Kenny up with a chair. They've been very, very good with this so far. You don't see 700 dopey finishes every month. You see one in a blue moon. It's great, and I hope it continues. Number 4, sensory inclusivity. In February 2019, AEW partnered with a group called Culture City with the goal being to produce a more sensory inclusive product, and it was specifically rating to children suffering from afflictions like autism, PTSD, anxiety issues, and a whole lot more. More than just slapping AEW is for everybody on a t-shirt and forgetting about it, this really has made a difference. And I've got some quotes here from Cody. As far as their mission statement went, they were out to cater towards people who have trouble processing sensory information at large events. And this meant toning down on things like loud noises, strong smells, and anything that could trigger a negative reaction. And AEW has delivered on this in several ways. If you want to know why their pyrotechnics don't go boom and rather just go fizz, well, here you go. And on top of this, we have several accounts of the company going out of their way to help people suffering from these conditions. We've got them handing out noise-cancelling earmuffs at show, providing cue cards for non-verbal people. They've distributed lanyards so that staff can identify people with sensory disorders. And they've even set aside a room with low lighting, less noise, and comfortable seating to allow these folk to process the show. It's a great move, a promise they're delivering on every single time by the sounds of things, and long may it continue. Number 3. Fluid alignment. Now, back in January 2019 at the Jacksonville press conference, Cody explicitly said that AEW wouldn't coach people how to be fans. They weren't going to stand there and go, cheer this guy, boo this guy, you must cheer this guy because he's the babyface, and you must hate this guy because he's the baddie. No. AEW's alignment scale was going to be a lot less rigid. You would still have room for traditional bad guys. A guy like MJF, right? He's a scumbag. Same goes for Pac. They are not playing in shades of grey at all. They're very clear heels. But at the same time, AEW wanted the freedom to kind of dabble in both. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they've created a roster full of tweeners. What it means is that the characters are flexible. They can be fully formed, three-dimensional people who don't have to worry about doing this because they're a babyface and this is to heel. I think the Young Bucks are a really good example of this. I mean, they are understandably received as heroes every single time they come out, and how could they not be for that audience? But at the same time, if you've watched Matt and Nick Jackson once in the ring, you know that they're kind of dickish. They do things like talking trash, they show off, they taunt, they pose, they're assholes. For a lot of the time, those guys are show-off assholes because it fits their character. And if you stop them doing that because they're getting cheers, well, it would betray who they are. It would betray who they are as performers. It wouldn't be good, and it would be a violation of everything that this promotion stands for. The system works. I mean, there are faces and heels on this roster, but they're flexible. Take a guy like Jon Moxley. He's been all over shades of grey since this whole thing began. And is he one of the most over wrestlers in North America? I mean, yeah, of course he is. It works. Number 2, wins and losses matter. So Cody said in Jacksonville, wins and losses will matter in AEW like they have never mattered before. The promotion would operate under a relatively strict but still flexible competitive framework, which would mean ranking systems. So you've seen the top 5s, right? I mean, the theory is that you win a match and you go up. You lose a match and you go down. It's simple, it's effective, it's logical, and you know, a lot of people have a lot of trouble with the implementation, but I think they've delivered on it so far. But a key point in AEW's wins and losses matter philosophy is that this thing isn't a binary. Win 1 doesn't necessarily mean the same as win 2. So, for example, if you beat QT Marshall, you know, it's a little number 1, it's an extra digit on your win-loss record, but it doesn't quite have as much heft as beating Chris Jericho, now does it? And similarly, losing to a guy like Pac, well, that's no great shame, but brother, if you lose to Michael Nakazawa, that's not a good look. That factors into the rankings, and the rankings also take both the year's records into account and career records as well. They mash them together, they've come up with a system that's robust, and really, I mean, unless you're being kind of intellectually dishonest with yourself, I think it works. And also, going back to the core point here, if you consider the muck that Jon Moxley had to wade through, if you consider all the hurdles he had to leap just to become a contender to Chris Jericho's AEW World title, then yeah, he earned that shot. He was oppressed by management. He had to go through these lights out matches. He walked out on Pac in a tag match and got punished for that. He fell back down the pecking order. It all makes sense. Other title contenders, Cody, top of the rankings when he was named Chris Jericho's #1 contender. Makes sense. Jake Hager earned his opportunity by going 5-0. He also threw Jon Moxley off a goddamn stage, so hey, there you go. Darby Allin earned his shot by beating a heated rival, Jimmy Havoc, in a #1 contenders match, and also he drew with Cody, who was the #1 ranked wrestler at the time. It all makes Scorpio Sky. There's another one. Long winning streak taking him to Chris Jericho and his title shot. Wins and losses, my friends, matter. And at number 1, listening to the audience. Part of being a successful, fan-focused organization is being able to step away, keep things at arm's length, observe how they're going down with the casual consumer, and if they're not going down well, you gotta change things. And AEW, since launching, has a track record of doing just that. I mean, the list of things that have flopped initially, but they've been able to turn around by twisting a few nuts and bolts, changing a few things up, well, it's long as hell. Let's take Jake Hager as an example. The guy basically did nothing for his first few months. He was a silent drone, and that attracted a lot of criticism. So what did AEW do? Well, they had him beat they had him beat Dustin Rhodes, they had him squash a few jobbers, he powerbombed Jon Moxley off the goddamn stage, and suddenly, within a month, he was a credible world title contender. Or how about the Nightmare Collective? Everyone hated that, and it only lasted a couple of weeks before they put the damn thing in the bin. Another example, a different one, Alex Marvez on commentary. People didn't like that. Gone. Tony Schiavone, you're up, pal. Big improvement. Hangman Page, that might be the most spectacular one of all. His milquetoast babyface run against Chris Jericho just didn't get over. It wasn't resonating. So what did they do? Well, they helped Page just realize himself, be himself. Do your thing, man. Become the hard-drinking man of the people. And now, he's the most over thing in the whole goddamn company. Except maybe Jericho, but who's more over than Jericho? God, maybe? So looking at these examples, where it matters, AEW are listening to the right people and taking the right course of actions. That doesn't mean listening to trolls. That doesn't mean listening to people who make stupid arguments like Cody equals Jeff Jarrett, which can be disproved in a second. Cody's much more over than Jeff Jarrett ever was, you numpties. They're doing the right things, is what I'm trying to say. They're making big picture solutions for big problems. Now, the one sticking point here might be the Dark Order, but here's the thing about the Dark Order. We don't know how over the group is really at the moment. Brody Lee is in charge. They're doing things a little bit differently. But there's no goddamn crowds to tell us whether or not this thing's working. So we can't really use that against them right now. Yes, the group has flopped in the past, but maybe when it comes back to TV with Brody Lee, things will be different. We'll reserve judgment on that until it happens. Anyway guys, that's it. My breakdown of all the promises that I feel AEW has kept since launching is over. But as always, I'm interested in knowing what you guys think, so head on down to the comment section below, type out your little comments. Once you've done that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. After that, you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy H. Murray, where, I don't know, you can scream bias and I'll mute you or something. It'll be fun. Bye.